Hello, in this video I want to show how to create a barbed wire in Blender 2.8. We will use curves and modifiers to automate most of the process, so let's get started. First, we need to make one piece of the wire. For that we start with a cylinder. By the way, you can see the buttons I pressed on the bottom left there. JayAnAms made a really cool plugin for that. So now we have this cylinder with 6 sides. You can use more if you want, it doesn't really matter. And I'll rotate it so it's nicely on the x-axis, and then I scale it not on the x-axis by pressing Shift X while scaling. And I'll move it upwards a bit so it's nicely above the x-axis. Copy it, move it to the bottom. It doesn't have to be super accurate, it doesn't really matter. Now I go to phase mode, I select these two phase rings, and I'll just delete them. And that leaves us with only these ends. And because it kind of, on a wire, on a barbed wire, it kind of is like a spiral, the top one needs to be connected to the bottom. So I'll press F3 and search for bridge edge loops, and this essentially connects them. Now we don't need these faces here anymore, so we can just delete them. And now I'll add 3 edge loops here, and I'll select the edge loop in the middle, then I'll turn on proportional editing, connected only, sphere shape. And now I'm moving it on the y-axis, and from the front perspective rotating it a bit. And now the same for the other side. So this one I move a bit, and then I rotate it a bit. And now I set this to shade smooth. And if I add an array modifier now, it already looks like the wire you see on the barbed wire, but there are like these gaps. That's because there you have double vertices, and if we activate merge on the modifier, that disappears. Obviously this is now way too large because this is 1 meter, so I'll just scale it down using the 3D cursor as the pivot. If the 3D cursor is not in the center on your scene, just hit Shift C and it'll reset it to there. And I scale this down. I don't want to make this like scientifically accurate, just that it kind of looks and feels alright. But we don't want to use a fixed count here in the modifier, because that's a lot of work to adjust. We just wanted to follow along curve. So I create a curve. I'll just make a NURBS curve for testing. And I'll just, I don't know, edit it a bit so we see the changes it makes. Okay, and now on the modifier, I'll choose fit curve. And then on the object here, I select the curve. And that copies it to the exact length of the curve. So if I now add a curve modifier and choose the NURBS curve here as an object, you can see that the wire already follows along nicely, and we get this cool effect. The NURBS curve we can also edit, and it grows along. Now this of course isn't a barbed wire yet, so we still need to make the spiky things that wrap around. And so you need an add-on for this. So preferences, yeah, and then type in extra objects, and then you have add curve extra objects. You need to activate that. Well, it makes it a lot easier. Let's put it that way. So I can go to curve, then curve spirals, arc median, and this allows me to change a lot of to make a spiral automatically. So I want a Bezier curve, I want it to be automatic, so that makes it nicely smooth. And then on the height, I want it to grow, and I want 2 loops or 2 turns. On the steps, so the steps is essentially how many controllers it puts along the curve, and because it's a fairly simple one, that's just kind of round. 4 actually do the job, so we don't need more. And that's it. That's how I create the curve. And now in the edit mode of it, I'm gonna duplicate it, rotate by 180 degrees on the z-axis, and this gives us that kind of shape. And now, by the way, take note, I'm still in 3D cursor mode. Just like, yeah, I don't know. So all the edits I'm doing right now use the 3D cursor as a pivot. And then I'm going to go into this option here, and on the geometry I can give it some depth. So this gives it thickness, and yeah, I think that's fine. So what I can do now, oh, by the way, you should always rename stuff. So this is our wire, this is our curve, and this is our spiky thing. I don't know how you call them in English. Anyways, now in the F3 menu, we can search for convert to, and then mesh from curve, and now we get this mesh. And basically at all the endpoints of this, we want the spikes. And this is a pretty easy thing. For now, I'm just making end caps here to the thing, because now I can easily extrude along the normal. So I do this, and then Alt-M at center. And now I do the same for all the others. So Alt-M at center. Alt-M at center. And here again, Alt-M at center. Nice. And now, what I also like to do, proportional editing is still on. Yeah, what you can do now is go in and just move a few of the points around, because if you look at these, they never look perfect. Like, they always have some dent somewhere, like up bent weirdly, or yeah, stuff like that. So this, I think, kind of does the job. So I'm going to scale it down a lot, because as you can see, it's still way too large. So I don't know, this seems like it might be fine. So I'm gonna rotate it on the y-axis by 90 degrees. And I'm gonna check whether or not, yeah, I think this does the job. And now what I can do is just well, move it right to the center, and then perhaps I can make some adjustments to this, like that's maybe a bit too much. Well, we'll just make it fit a bit better to the curve, and yeah, I think that already does the job. So now we almost do the same thing we did before already. We take the array modifier and we set it to fit curve, and then select the curve. And then instead of relative offset, we want a constant offset. And I don't know what the exact value here should be, but maybe that's a bit too much. Maybe maybe every 30 centimeters. Honestly, I'm not much of a barbed wire expert, so correct me if I'm wrong. By the way, one thing I forgot to mention, in these settings you can activate cavity, and that gives you a bit of ambient occlusion in the viewport, which just makes it easier to look at things, I would say. So now there's just one thing missing. We need to give it a material to make it look nice. So I'll create a new material. I'll name it Barbed Wire, and we also need to unwrap this. So unwrap Smart UV project, and that probably makes it really big on the UV editor. Yeah, so I'll scale this down a bit, and then this is a bit more tricky to texture, I would say, because we have this point where it kind of needs to tile, more or less. And also, if we do it with just one of these, then the scaling will be too small. So I went to actually add another array modifier, and I put this in front. And here I'm just gonna do a fixed count, and I'll do it 3 times. And I'll also merge this. And then I actually want to apply this. So what this gives me is just a longer space to work with. And this I actually want to unwrap properly. So I'll select these two, Control E, mark seam, then select everything, U for unwrap, and now we should have a nice unwrap. Yeah, we do. And it also more or less tiles. So what I can do here is select these, scale on the Y to 0, and then we get this flat line. And we can set the Y position to 1 here. And on the bottom we can do the same. So scale Y 0 and then Y position to 0. And then this should give us alright tiling with the tiling texture. So now let's continue with the material. They will use the same barbed wire material. And I'm gonna, oh, nope, I want the shader editor. Okay, so what I'm gonna add here is an image texture. And I have a material that I created quickly in Substance Designer. You can grab it for free in the description. It's just a really simple tiling, tiling material. Here we go. So now I'll quickly set this up. So base color to base color, then the metalness, non-color, and into metallic. The normal needs a normal map. And then this is also non-color data. It goes into the normal, and then this goes into the roughness, and it's also non-color data. And this should do the job. So let me check this out in look dev mode. And yeah, seems good. So I'm gonna close this. And if I now, in the modifiers, activate this, and on here, add the curve modifier, choose my curve. Here we go. Now, I don't really like the rust pattern it has right now. It's too repetitive. Oh, what happened? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this, go into the UV editor, and I'm just going to move it a bit. And yeah, that seems fine to me. So obviously this is just a quick way to do it, and you could probably polish this a bit more, but still I think it's pretty cool. So now I want to show a bit of cool stuff you can do with this technique. The first would be how easy it actually is to create, for example, a spiraling barbed wire that would be on top of a wall. So for that we also create a spiral here, and on the settings we put a few more turns. So yeah, I don't know, 10 is fine. Then on the height, maybe 0.35 or something like that. I don't know, doesn't really matter. And I'll switch to solid here so it all runs a bit faster. And now to make our setup to adjust to that curve, we just select the other curve in the settings of the modifiers, and we're good. So now we have this, and the cool thing is, I'll hide the old curve for a second. We can actually animate this this curve, and the barbed wire grows along with it, which is a pretty cool thing. So I'll select all of them, and I'll hit F3, hook to new object. This gives me a new object, and now for example, if I keyframe the scale on this, then go to, I don't know, maybe frame 100, and I'll scale it only on the, not on the z-axis, I mean. And keyframe this again, and as you can see, it can become quite heavy. But now if I play it, the barbed wire properly follows along. Now if you need these in a real-time environment, so for example when you're making a game, this will have way too many polygons. So as you can see, this small scene already has 150,000 triangles, and obviously that's way too heavy for any real-time application. But we can actually bake this down to a plane in Blender, so let me show how this works. So for this, I'm gonna get rid of the curve modifiers, and actually I'll delete the curve, we don't need it anymore. And now on this, I'm gonna fit it to fit length, and the length I want is 1 meter. Same thing on this, I want this to be fit length and then length 1 meter. So this gives us this fairly simple, 1 meter piece of it. So I'll add a plane, and this plane I'll scale down an x and y axis. Sorry for that. And it needs to be slightly wider than the whole thing. And I'm gonna scale it down on the x, and I'm gonna move it here. By the way, I'm in median point mode now. So I'm gonna scale it up to be roundabout in the middle between the two pieces here. So this looks good to me. I'm gonna scale it up a bit more. Yeah, that seems good to me. And now I'm gonna move it up. And now we can actually bake down the texture of this to this. And for that we need to switch to the cycles rendering engine, because the Eevee doesn't support support baking right now. So under the bake tab, we now have a bunch of settings, but before we can actually get started with it, we need to do a bunch of stuff. So what we need to do is, on the plane, we need to create a material. So I'll just call this real-time mat. And I'm gonna go into the shader editor here, and I'm going to create an image texture, and here I'm gonna hit new, and this is going to be our baked base color, and because our object is so long and so narrow, we actually can divide this by 16 and still get a high enough resolution for our texture. This is going to be our base color, and I'm also going to open up another window down here with the UV editor, and I'm gonna open my baked base color. So what I can do now is I select this. Oh no, actually before, also one weird thing is, in Blender, when you bake base color, it takes light into calculation. So you actually want to have some light in your scene to light up the object. Otherwise, you kind of don't see anything on your base color bake, which is, in my opinion, a really weird thing, but it is what it is. Here, make sure you have selected to active on. So first the selected, then the active object, and then it bakes from the selected objects to the active object. And we want to bake this base color here, so I'm gonna hit bake. Now this is a bit too bright, which is down to this light. So I'll turn this light a bit lower, and then I'll just bake again. Also notice I have error margin on 0 here. This is because the object here doesn't really need an error margin because it's transparent. And that way we can actually use the alpha here to drive the transparency of the material. So if I add a transparent BSDF and a mix shader, and then I put this into the inputs and then use the alpha as the factor, and then use this in our output, and I switch to rendered now. You can already see that this is working. Obviously it doesn't look good now because we only have base color, we don't have any of the others, but no worries, we'll bake them in a second. I'm gonna go back to solid for better performance. And now same selection, and I'm gonna create a new image texture. I'm gonna hit new, same resolution, but this is going to be baked N for normal, and this is non-color data, although I'll leave it on color for bit. I don't know if it changes something about the baking. I'll just set it to color for now. And now here I choose normal, again selected to active, and I just oh, actually I'll hook this up before already. So normal map here, and then into the normal bake. And here we go. Now if I go to rendered view, it already looks a lot closer to what I'm trying to create here. Also it's just way too bright right now because the light is directly at it. So yeah, this already looks pretty close. But I'm gonna continue and bake the rest of this. So we need another one, so create a new image, and we need baked roughness. I'm gonna plug this into the roughness. Also, this is non-color data. I just noticed this as well. And now here I'm going to choose roughness, and the selection is still correct. I'm going to hit bake. And here we go. That's our roughness. Now, lastly, one thing that's missing is the metallic map. And that one is a bit more tricky, but not impossible. So I'm going to add another image texture. I'm going to create a new one here, and I'm going to name this baked M for metallic. And I'm actually going to hook this up into the roughness, and you'll see in a second why. So yeah, I'm also going to select the metallic one, but we'll need to change something in a different material here, in the barbed wire material. So here in the barbed wire, what I want to do is I want to take the metallic and hook it up into the roughness. And now if I select this, this and this, then go to baking, and I have my baked M selected here, and I bake the roughness, it bakes the metallic of the texture, or like the metallic textures, onto the metallic texture of this. This is because we just switched it up. The thing is, this doesn't have a metallic baker, so we kind of need to circumvent it that way. Anyways, this works really well. So now I can put this back into roughness again, and this into metallic, and also on the barbed wire material itself, I can put this back into the roughness, and we're good to go. So now if I go into rendered mode here, you can see nothing, which is weird. Okay, let me check that out. Okay, so I found what happened. I just by accident had barbed wire baking selected here, but it's the real-time material. It's just material I had there for tests I did before. But yeah, as you can see, this works fine. It gives an okay result. So we can actually use this to also drive the same modifier setup we had before. So let me close this down and show this real quick. So I'm gonna hide this and this, and I'm just gonna take this, move it on the x-axis, and then perhaps like this, and I'm going to add an array modifier, and I'm also going to add another curve, just a NURBS curve. It doesn't really matter, but I don't know, I just like NURBS curves. Fit curve, NURBS curve, and then curve modifier, NURBS curve. As you can see, it's like very jagged right now, or like, yeah, I don't know, it doesn't have a lot of resolution. We can change that by just adding a few edge loops, actually maybe even more, and then it becomes smooth. And now if I set this to rendered mode, it almost gives the same result while not needing even close to the performance, because this now has 276 triangles, before it was 150,000. So you could actually build barbed wire with this for a game, apply the modifiers and export it, and it would run fine in a game engine. So yeah, thanks for watching. If you have any suggestions or criticisms, leave it in the comments, and see you in the next video.